Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Before I begin, like I always like to ask questions to people. How many of you are bike riders here? Bike riders, motorcycle riders. Not a single one? Oh, one. Okay. So you are in my team. So even I'm not a bike rider. I'm not a passionate bike rider, I would say. I like to sit in the passenger seat of good motorcycles. So this is one attempt to sit in the passenger seat with some of the best bike companies in the world. And you might ask, why biking? So last week I celebrated in my mind a 15-year anniversary of my bike ride with few of my friends from Mumbai to Pune. And I was sitting behind as a pillion on a Thunderbird which broke down several times. But subsequently, after a few years, I realized that the guy sold it and bought a new Thunderbird which doesn't break down as much. But apart from that, the ride was quite fun. I could experience what other people say, that the wind goes through your hair and all the romance of bike riding. At the same time, I never really understood why people enjoy riding bikes so much. So I decided to ask some of my friends who are passionate bike riders, who swear by the brands of these bikes, and they know every inch of their bike so well that even a minor difference in the engine's firing they will pick up and they will maintain it themselves. So when you ask these questions to people, this is what you get. So if I have to explain, you wouldn't understand. And which is true in a sense, because I have been raised in a suburb where the only bike I had seen was the milk guy carrying the bullet and milk cartons with him every day, or a commuter scooter going from point A to point B, and people were not really interested in the passion of riding. They just wanted to go from point A to point B, and that's it. You only choose the color of your vehicle once when you buy it, and then let it fade to its natural shade, whichever it comes. So I'm sure this must be white when it was bought, but anyway. But when you see that, when you have experienced that, on the other hand, when you see this, that when you buy Royal Enfield or any of these touring bikes, they come with an implicit expiry date that you have to go to Himalayas on this bike at least in the next 5 years. And a lot of people do that. And you can see all these riders dressed up in the proper biking gear with all their pads and helmets and carrying their entire life with them to the Himalayas. And in the cities also you can see these biker gangs going around making noise, revving, burning rubber. And I always beg to try to understand is that if these bikes are coming on the streets now, somebody must be definitely benefiting from it. And that somebody is quite well known in India. It is Royal Enfield, where you can see somewhere close to 30,000 bikes per year is now 10 times, more than 10 times of that. It's close to 5 lakhs, slightly greater than 5 lakhs per year now as of December 2015. And I always wonder why. Why are these numbers being shown to us? Why are these numbers even appearing right now? And I wanted to go back in history, to learn why do people actually like to ride. And there are some people who just like to ride. There are some people who like to read books. There are some people who like to buy the latest gadget. And that's how there are these people. You may know them in your office, but when they go out on the weekend, you will never recognize them because of their biking gear. And they will go past you, you will hear the bike, but you will not recognize them. And this may not be just a phenomenon from abroad. In India also, irrespective of what bikes we had, people have always enjoyed riding them whichever way they can and have fun with it. And obviously, Bollywood has done its bit. You have Bobby or Sholay who have made bike riding fun or seem to be fun and approachable. You have Doom, which got in the whole super bike craze in India. And then you have this gentleman who for some reason has a fetish for perfect splits on whichever machine has horsepower. So even a horse for that matter. So yeah, 2 cars, bikes, doesn't matter. To such an extent that even Jean-Claude Van Damme tried to impersonate him on a Volvo truck. But if you notice here, you may not recognize many of these bikes if you're not a bike fan, and you start seeing more sophisticated bikes on screens now. So this is a Harley Davidson, this is Ranbir Kapoor, this is Katrina Kaif and Hrithik Roshan on the Royal Enfield bike, and you are starting to see more of these bikes on the screens now. And who are these people who are buying these bikes? They are obviously not those guys who are going from point A to point B only. They are guys with a mission, with a passion to ride this particular motorcycle. And there's a reason behind that. So, if you go back in time and study all these brands, big biking brands, before there was Facebook, Twitter, any kind of social network, one social network were these biking communities. So they used to come together, whichever bike brands they used to probably assemble it themselves or buy it off the shelf and modify them or customize them to their heart's content. They used to come together, they used to make noise, they used to share biking stories, they used to travel long distances on their bikes, just for the heck of it. And as much as this trend was true outside of India, in the developed markets where the biking culture was already present, in India we are now seeing promotional events like, say, the India Bike Week, which was hosted by Harley Davidson, or even the Royal Enfield hosted Rider Mania. And you can see riders from all over the country, irrespective of what bikes they own, they flock to these locations and they share their biking stories, or they are just there, for the love of the community. And not just from India, but people from all over the world do come and share their passion for these vintage bikes. But the question always remains, which bike? And if you talk to a certain type of bike lover about why he chose his brand, you will get a story for at least an hour as to the history of the brand and why he has chosen it, if he is passionate enough about the brand. So I went in and asked some people who own these brands, and nevertheless I got stories, but none of them meaningful. But I wanted to focus on a specific category of bikes, which is known as the touring bike. This is one of the kind of touring bikes which is used for long distance comfortable riding. And this did not happen by accident. Actually, I found this photo in Economic Times one day, and it was very curious. So it showed that Eicher Motors market cap is now equal to Harley Davidson's market cap. And I was intrigued. The brand Harley Davidson, for a non-biker like me, had some relevance in my mind. I had seen it in movies, I had seen Terminator, I know Arnold rides a Harley Davidson. It's something that people will just know. People will know Harley Davidson t-shirts, people will know everything. And who is this Eicher Motors with a Royal Enfield brand, which is an India-specific brand, going neck to neck with a very global and very well-known brand? So I decided to do a comparison between, say, Harley Davidson and our own Royal Enfield. So many of these bike companies have a very interesting history. So both of them, or many of the bike companies, have had several rebirths. So the latest rebirth for Royal Enfield was in the late 1990s when Eicher Motors had acquired it, and it was sitting in the Eicher Motors stable along with the commercial vehicles and tractor business, and was not doing really well. Although people have been riding Royal Enfield bikes for several decades before that, but the brand was there. You could hear the bikes on the street. That's what I meant. And similar with Harley Davidson, an iconic brand, have tens of decades worth of existence. And again, it had to be revived in the 1980s. And when I mean revive, it means really pulling it out of bankruptcy and revamping the business model to what we see now. So in 1981, these gentlemen here, along with, I think one of them is the grandson of the original William Davidson, who founded the company with Mr. Harley. They and the CEO of that company, they bought back, they did a management buyout and took the company to themselves and decided to revamp the business. And why is that? So a company that was formed in 1903, I guess, a company that old with that kind of legacy, which had bikes which had ridden the First World War, Second World War, and the kind of rugged bikes, people recognize them very easily. People tattooed their name on their body. And these kind of bikes, why does the company require to be revived? The brand is already there, people already know it. But just knowing the brand and the brand being out there does not mean it's a very well run business. The company was bleeding cash, the company's dealerships were suffering, and they realized that they had just too much money tied up in working capital. And when they bought the company back from the company called AMF, which was the erstwhile owner of the Harley Davidson bikes, they decided to use, ironically, Japanese techniques of management like just-in-time inventory in order to clear the working capital, the cash tied in working capital. This guy, Siddharth Lal, the son of promoter Vikram Lal, did something similar to Royal Enfield brand when he took the reins for this brand and realized that this company also has a popular brand but needs some reignition in order to bring the bikes back on track. So this is it. The black line represents Royal Enfield's volume numbers, represented on the left side. On the right side you can see Harley Davidson's volume numbers from 2004 to 2015. Now you might be very surprised that Harley Davidson has a flattish or declining kind of a volume trend, and Royal Enfield has a meteoric trend. But wait till you see this. When Harley Davidson was actually reignited into the current form that it is, it also had this meteoric rise. It went from less than 50,000 units per year to close to 3 lakh units per year. And it's a premium category bike. So just to take a quick look, Royal Enfield is a 115-year-old brand, Harley Davidson is a 113-year-old brand. Doesn't make any difference, but yeah, the story is interesting. Royal Enfield says that they can reach 50 countries with their dealerships. Harley Davidson, by one estimate, says 90 countries, by one estimate says 100 countries. I just took an average of 100, it doesn't matter. Number of dealerships of Royal Enfield across the globe is 500, and number of dealerships of Harley Davidson is around 1435. Now, I've taken the liberty of stripping out the commercial vehicle business of Royal Enfield, of Eicher Motors, and this is only the bike revenue in millions of dollars to compare with Harley Davidson in millions of dollars. So you can see there is a 7x difference in sales, there is a 5x difference almost in PAT, and the EBIT margins are in favor of Royal Enfield right now, having a smaller base of operations. And Harley Davidson has had a recent bad year, that's why the margins look low, but otherwise they are in their early 20s or slightly at the 20% side, which is significant considering the kind of businesses they run. Royal Enfield gets 95% of their sales by just selling bikes, only bikes, whereas Harley Davidson makes only 77% selling bikes. So where does the rest of the money come from? 5% of Royal Enfield's money comes from spares and accessories. They don't break it up so far into merchandise, but Harley Davidson breaks it. So 16% of Harley Davidson's revenues come from their spare parts and the merchandise, that is the t-shirts, the riding gear and etc. The Harley Davidson branded goods that they sell. That contributes 5% of sales. So I tried to do a arithmetic work in trying to find what is the average price of a Harley Davidson compared to a Royal Enfield bike, and the number came to be $1,386, slightly less than 1 lakh, to $20,000 for a Harley Davidson, and it's quite significant considering it's a bike. But if you check the on-road price, it is close to 1.25 lakh plus, based on whichever models you buy as you go up in the ladder. And in India, Harley Davidson sells their cheapest bike at 4 lakh, around 4 lakh. And this is just the bike. You have to buy the pillion seat. I think it's 40 grand just to buy another seat. So it's quite expensive, as you might see. Number of units Royal Enfield makes is 5 lakhs as of December 2015, whereas Harley makes half of that. In India, Royal Enfield enjoys being the incumbent. It is a 60-year-old brand, whereas Harley Davidson, despite the knowledge of the brand, is only 7 years old as an operation in India. But before I go any deeper into Harley and all these things, I want to discuss something about the Indian two-wheeler market. And I have generously borrowed this from Bajaj Auto's presentation, which was made in November 14. The latest number are not available, but this is a very interesting read. You just get an understanding of the reach of these brands and how they have transformed themselves from the past 8 years. So you can see there is a premium segment at top, which says it sells around 750 units per month, representing 0.1% of the market in November 14. There is a sports segment, which includes the mid-level as well as some of the high-end bikes, which is around 18% of the market, whereas the bulk of the market is at the bottom, which is, as we might expect, 82%. So the industry makes around 9.3 lakh bikes per month. That's the scale of things in India. In the premium segment, you have the rupees 2.5 lakh plus bikes, which includes the Harley, the Kawasaki Ninja, the Triumph bikes. These are all super bikes. They don't sell as much. Let's go to the segment which is slightly below that, the upper segment of the sports category, which again have these Royal Enfield types, Honda sports bike, KTM, with the price range and the engine capacity in 250 to 500 cc. Then we have this lower version of those same bikes, similar brands, with a lower cc, starting from a lower cc, and which have touring features, which is the sweet spot for Royal Enfield. And that market is close to 30,000 units per month. Incidentally, Royal Enfield sells around 45,000 units per month now. And the lower category of the sports, which again has all our very well-known brands in India, in the range of 150 to 225 cc, which is our sports commuter motorcycle. Reasonable average, does well, less maintenance. Just to get an idea of rough market share, this may not be true now, it may have moved a little bit. So you can see Bajaj Auto brands versus the competitors in that category. That's a reasonable market share for many of these brands to have. Now this is an interesting category. Just to take a closer look, this was the sports category that we saw, which has all these premium and sports category bikes, and this is the mileage category. Look at what happened in India. FY06 to FY15, the mileage category actually did not grow as fast. In fact, degrew a little bit, but there was a huge growth in the sports category and the upper end of the mileage category. So you can clearly see that people have upgraded their tastes. These are just numbers. I mean, we can see them on the road as well. And we know that some brands have benefited more than others. Again, Royal Enfield is one of them. And just to create suspense of the rule, so Royal Enfield is no longer greater than Harley Davidson, but still, it's very close by. So just to get an idea of what Harley Davidson is doing in India. So here's the MD of Harley Davidson. We spent a lot of time on creating a dealer network, making sure that they were the right partners. We roped in biking enthusiasts who understood the brand and were convinced they needed to be in the high street locations. Then we made sure the experience was accessible to anyone who wanted to come in and get a taste of the Harley freedom. And this is quite something. So if you ask any of the luxury bike stores to give you a test drive, and if you are not the intended buyer, if they realize that you are not the intended buyer, they will not allow you to do a test drive. But Harley did not do that. Anybody could ride in the store and take a Harley bike for a ride, and they could bring it back to the store. And that's an experience which people want to have. So if you are on the fence, if you have the money, and you don't want to buy an expensive bike just for the heck of it, you might go to a Harley store and choose that, okay, I will spend some money on a Harley bike only if I like the ride. And the moment you like it, you are the instant convert, which is what Harley Davidson was looking for. And in the future slides, you will see the numbers as to how rapidly they have grown that segment. People don't buy the Harley because they want a powerful motorcycle. They buy because of the experience and the emotional connect. It was important to give a sense of that experience. And this is something you can hear across the segment. You go for the high-end sports superbike and you talk to those people as to why did you buy this superbike, and he will give you a similar response. There's an experience, there's a community, We ride on highways at speeds greater than 250 kilometers per hour, and that is the thrill for these people. There are people who ride Harley Davidsons and Royal Enfields, although they don't ride together because the Harleys are slightly faster. But you can know that these people are part of that community and they go on rides together in the Royal Enfield banners. So the top one is Harley Davidson, the middle one is Triumph, and this is our Royal Enfield. So in just 1 year, you can see some of the models. So this is the lowest end model, close to around 4.5 lakh rupees, the Street 750cc, one of the most popular bikes in the emerging markets for Harley Davidson. And you can just see from nothing in 1 year, it just sold 3,000 units because it was launched and available. And now Harley Davidson is in the works to launch the Street 500cc, which is going to compete directly with some of the 500cc bikes that Royal Enfield sells. Again, these are the slightly higher end brands in the range of 11 to 12 lakhs, but they also sell. This is slightly more expensive, 70 to 20 lakhs. And there are some bikes which are even more expensive as you start customizing them. And there is one thing about Harley Davidson is that if you look at the global sales, almost 90% of their sales of bikes are customized to some extent, and not just like adding a seat or adding a saddle or a leather jacket or something, but it's actually customized to the degree of putting the person's name or putting an extra coat of paint, the favorite shade of that person, and they will do that in the store for you. Again, Triumph, you can see, is chugging along, and the juggernaut in volumes is Royal Enfield. So Royal Enfield, in the beginning, if you look at the history of the company over the past 15 years, you will see that they had some of these brands, and it's not that they did not have the plans to make these bikes, but they did not have the production capacity to make them profitably. So when Siddharth Lal came in, he decided to reinvigorate the supply chain again and bring all these classic brands which people had some memory about, like the classic 350 or the Bullet 500. And once these bikes hit the street and people saw that there's a working market now, people are seeing these bikes more often, so there must be some dealer around, people started to ask around, and that's how the word of mouth spread. You will actually not see too many ad campaigns by Royal Enfield because the community itself is so strong that the word of mouth will let people know where dealers are. But for these bikes, they need some marketing. So Harley Davidson, when it came, the next year they started this India Bike Week, which invited all Harley owners, new Harley owners. And if you go back in the history of the company, there's something called as the Harley Owners Group, which is a 1 million strong paid members. They pay money to Harley Davidson in order to be a member of that group, and they receive all kinds of special facilities to go on Harvey sponsored rides and meet different people in the same network. So it's a social network people want to be a part of, and it's not cheap. So if you are a Harley Owners Group member, the life membership costs you 70,000 rupees a year, which is quite insane. Again, just to go back in history, you will see that Triumph is a British brand and Royal Enfield also is a British brand for the world. But for India, it's more like an Indian company. And Harley is the quintessential American brand. So the question, when you read about Harley Davidson, when you read through the annual reports and the conference calls and see the YouTube videos of people who ride Harley, you see these three things coming up more often. It's the personalization of each bike. So each bike is different. Every video you see, each bike has some or the other modification done to it. Somebody likes a giant thumping sound, somebody likes a lower thumping sound, they will modify the silencers. Somebody likes a particular paint of bike, color of bike, they will use that color. Again, it's never about riding alone. So yeah, people do ride alone, but it's the community experience. On a weekend, if you want to go somewhere, you go with your bike buddies and explore the local areas around your town, or go on a long ride for a week or something. And these bikes are quite capable of running on that distances. And the experience part is that if you're part of the community, you feel belong to the community. And at the same time, if you go back in time, you will realize that most of the Harley guys were guys with beards, leather jackets, paunches, riding around town, and people had a very negative memory of them. What happened in 1980 with the Harley Owners Group, it introduced family men who had that sense of identity with them, but didn't have a means to express it, and they had the money to express it, so they bought a bike. So they sell the idea of freedom from day-to-day grind. So how does Royal Enfield sell? Well, something similar, but they think in more practical terms. They say that the price point and the size of the engine of this bike allows this bike to be a very natural upgrade for a daily commuter. So somebody who is riding this bike, riding a 150 to 200cc bike, he can easily jump to a 300cc bike without thinking too much and not worrying about the cost. Again, they are very clear in mentioning that it's not a luxury brand. So most of their bikes are priced in the range of below 2 lakh or 2.5 lakhs. And they want to be a mid-sized leader. So there's a slide in the coming slides which shows why it is important for them to be a mid-sized leader. But Royal Enfield is not stopping there. So because Harley Davidson is a 100-year-old brand and it's one of the super brands in the world which nobody who rides can even remember that brand, they've done some phenomenal things with their brand, and Royal Enfield says why not learn from them. So take a look at this typical Harley store, and which has all the Harley Davidson merchandise stacked on it, right from the riding gear to t-shirts, jeans, even helmets somewhere. And this is a Royal Enfield store which is trying to mimic the same kind of experience where people will go and buy. And not to be biased about it, but the t-shirts are really good. And most of the things are not so expensive. So, of course, in Harley Davidson stores, if you go and buy a helmet, it will cost you at least 2.5 times the helmet which is there in the Royal Enfield store. And it's just the Harley brand behind the helmet. I mean, you can get it somewhere else on Fashion Street also. So, but not to belittle the brand, people do buy these things. Again, a typical Royal Enfield storefront, trying to get the retro vintage look, and this is just to show off what bikes they have in glossy colors, similar to what a Harley Davidson dealership would look like and any other motorcycle dealership would look like. But these brands have a natural pull to it because of the way they are aligned and the way the storefront looks. But the more interesting part is what is Royal Enfield doing abroad. And I will not say the India market is saturated, but India market has grown at a very fast pace in a very short amount of time. And in order to maintain that kind of pace of growth, either you have to make sure that the local market has the capacity to take more units off you, or you find some new markets to sell in. But it's not a very easy thing to do because Royal Enfield in the end is a British brand. It's not an Indian brand, and a lot of people outside of India may not have that same association of the brand as we have in India. So I would urge you to watch a video on Eicher Motors website, which is the December 2015 investor video of the president of Royal Enfield. His name is Rudratesh Singh. He shows this very interesting chart. Let me explain to you. So he says most industries have this pyramid structure where the mass market is the biggest product category, the mid market is a smaller category, and the premium is a very niche category with a very small amount of volumes. In developing countries, he says the motorcycle industry is structured in a very different way. The mass category is the biggest bulging category with less than 250cc engine capacity bikes. There is a middle market which has 250 to 750cc capacity bikes, which is not as big as it should be according to some common industry structure. And then there is a very niche bike segment which only rich people can afford, which is above 750cc. But it's exactly opposite in the mature market where people have more money to spend, and the biggest category is actually the premium bike category. The middle category again languishes somewhere in the middle, and there is a very small market in terms of sales for the smaller units, smaller sized engine bikes. And once you have said that you want to be a mid-sized leader, you clearly know their focus is going to bulge this category with their bikes or their brand. But it's easier said than done. So I want to narrate a small anecdote about Honda and what they did when they went into the US market for the first time in 1960. And it's quite interesting because throughout the history of management textbooks, they have said something else as to what Honda did, and in reality something else happened, which again some other management expert revealed to us. So in 1960, Honda did not have any bike market in the US. And the US was dominated by all these big bikes, 1000cc kind of Harley Davidson bikes, and Honda had no presence. So they sent 4 engineers, product managers, to the US. They booked a hotel room. 2 people slept on the bed, 2 people on the floor. Very frugal operation. They decided not to commute on their own bigger products. They decided to commute on the smaller products, the moped type products, 50cc, 100cc products. But they commuted to the dealers and they made sure that the product was there on the dealership storefront. So now let me take you back to what the management theory says. So a very reputed consulting firm did a case study on how Honda managed this in 40 years time and how the British bike imports fell in the same time in the US. So their theory was that Honda sent these 4 product managers to the US with a very specific strategy to go in the lower end market and sell the lower end bikes. And like you know how disruption works, the lower category slowly grows into the mass category and you can start selling your higher end bikes because the brand is now visible to people and the service centers are established. And dealers are more receptive in keeping your bikes in the store. That's what management theory says. And that's what was sold to the British bike companies. And still the numbers didn't improve despite the specific focus on the kind of bikes which are required in the US. In reality, a mixture of luck and a mixture of keeping your ear to the ground and listening to what the market was saying, the Japanese product managers used to ride on their mopeds to the convenience store to buy stuff, and people used to ask, where did you buy this bike, the small bike? And these are regular people who come to the store to buy groceries and something. And they were very convenient. Instead of taking your car every time to the grocery store and finding a parking spot, they were small bikes. You could park it somewhere near a wall, lock them, go inside the store, hop in, hop out, and go back home. And once these managers started hearing the request that where can we get these bikes, these smaller bikes, they realized that there's a mass market available which they had never dreamt of. They changed their product strategy. They introduced all these smaller bikes, and the results are here. So the smaller bikes sold like crazy. The dealers got receptive of the brand, and eventually the bigger bikes which were introduced, the 1000cc bikes of Honda, started selling as well, to the detriment of the British bike businesses like BSA, Triumph, and many more. In fact, if you look at the niche bike segments or the bike manufacturers in each and every country, there will be at least 50 bike manufacturers and people will swear by them equally. So the person who likes Norton bikes from UK will talk in the same passion that a person who rides a Harley or a person who rides a Royal Enfield. And when you look at this, an analogy of the craft beer industry comes to mind, that when people drink a particular brand of craft beer, they will swear by it because it suits their taste very well or suits their preference of what they want to show to the outside world. Again, Royal Enfield historically is a British brand, so that's going to be an interesting challenge to overcome. Apart from that, I just wanted to see, so Honda obviously is the biggest bike maker in the world. These are the volumes as of the latest financial years. 17 million bikes a year they sell. Yamaha sells, and this also includes India. Yamaha also including India sells 9.72. In fact, this is not broken out here, but 15.5 million bikes are only sold in Asia Pacific region by Honda. So the remaining market is a small market, for rounding error if you just ask me. Harley Davidson is out here, Royal Enfield is here. Hero MotoCorp sells 6.6, so Hero MotoCorp actually becomes the number 3 in the world in terms of volumes, followed by Honda India. Honda India actually is part of this, so no need of calculating again, and Bajaj Auto. These are formidable players, and if you look at the market caps of these companies, these 4 companies specifically, Harley Davidson, Royal Enfield, Hero MotoCorp and Bajaj Auto, they're in the same range of $7 to $9 billion range. But again, every brand needs a very compelling story for people to believe in and use the bike. It's not enough to just see the bike going every day and asking for where the dealer is, but you actually need to feel the pull for the brand. Let me give an example in a familiar term. So imagine there's a very expensive brand of single malt which you covet, you want to buy it, and you finally find a bottle which is way beyond what you want to pay for alcohol anyway, but you go and buy it because you think that the story written on the label is something that you want to experience. Maybe it's made somewhere in some river in Scotland, which is very rare and comes only once in a year, whatever. Although if you tell it to some Indian, he will laugh at you because generally rivers in India are not that clean to make whiskey out of it. And if I give you the same whiskey in an unmarked, unlabeled bottle and just verbally tell you that some story of similar kind is there for the same bottle. In fact, the contents can be exactly the same. You will not know the difference even if you sip it. Probably if you are a whiskey connoisseur, you might notice it, but well, my point is that every brand needs a story. And if you can put a story on the label and make people believe that its brand value is more than what people should pay, then I think it's a compelling strategy for a bike manufacturer of that size who has never seen a mid-market grow in developing countries as well as developed countries. The British heritage is there to haunt them and also to probably promote them, because these bikes are not necessarily bad bikes. They used to be very bad. So like I said, 15 years ago the bike broke down at least 7 times from Mumbai to Pune, and the breakdown cost us around half an hour each time just to figure out what will happen and then drag it to the mechanic and get it fixed. These bikes still leak oil and people still buy them. They don't mind. It's like a matter of pride that leak nahi kiya to Enfield nahi. But I'm sure they have fixed many of these issues in the supply chain and the manufacturing. I personally believe that the force will be strongest with the brand who experiments and learns to differentiate. And if you listen to Rajiv Lal carefully in his investor presentation, I think he means to do exactly the same thing. He says, I will open a dealership and I will see what the people are asking for. I will use my products, I will showcase them around, let people drive them, and then we will see where the market goes from there. If there is a demand in that market, more investments are made in that market. If there is lesser demand, he will not fret over it. And I think from his experience, it takes around a couple of years to seed a new brand and let people be aware of what they want to actually enjoy. Like I said, people who are fanatics about certain brands, they are fanatic for a reason. And if there is a story to be fanatic about, well, why not? So in the course of a month when I was reading this, I found this book, The Lean Machine. It describes the downfall and the resurrection of the brand of Harley Davidson, especially from a manufacturing point of view. So this guy is an operations guy who joined from some other bike maker who were equally downtrodden, and they realized that Harley Davidson has to be revamped. He was at the right moment in the company and he saw all the management changes being done and the kind of inventory management practices, the dealership network that was set up, and the way dealers were treated from before. And it makes an interesting read about how other brands who were around that time trying to sell. So Japanese brands in 1980s, like you saw in that graph, were quite formidable. But still Harley had the same challenge to sell. So this book gives a very nice walkthrough to the way the brand was resurrected. At the same time, the manufacturing facilities were improved. This is a very nice coffee table book for Harley Davidson connoisseurs. You can go through the entire history of the bike and see at different cultural points. So during the First World War, Second World War, then post Second World War, then after the whole 60s began, where people became more free to ride bikes and roamed around the country on their bikes making noise, how that culture got created. And it shows how the brand has been seamless throughout the entire 100 years of the company's existence, and which is very rare for a brand to actually enjoy that kind of following. I mean, it may not matter now to have a tattoo of the brand on your forearm, but the brand still resonates with people who even know a little bit about Harley Davidson. I mean, you will still turn your head if you hear the bike's thump, any bike's thump, Royal Enfield bike or Harley Davidson bike. I wouldn't say the same thing about a lower mass market bike, lower CC mass market bike. This is an interesting book which debunks the management consulting theories about how the Japanese started selling their bikes, and it's a very entertaining book because it goes on debunking other management theories as well. So probably you would want to read it just for the fun of it. Japan's motorcycle wars was an unexpected unexpectedly amazing book because I was never expecting to get into so much detail about the Japanese bike industry, but the kind of focus the Japanese manufacturers have on engineering and just engineering. So imagine that you are selling bikes, a good quality bike, a 1000cc bike next to a lawnmower. Why? Because the lawnmower has had the same amount of engineering effort as the bike itself. So they pride in their technical prowess, whereas brands have come much later. And yet Honda is the biggest manufacturer of motorcycles in the world. So there's something to say. Shooting Star is again a very interesting book. It does not have too much history, unfortunately, about Royal Enfield's roots in the UK, but it does talk about Triumph, BSA bikes, and Norton, which are very popular even right now, and how they have grown and how they have also faltered. So when you combine experiences of all these books, you realize that making motorcycle brands last for 100 years is very difficult. And if you have a brand with you which has lasted 100 years, you might as well capitalize on it. And that's all I had to share. So if you have any questions about this, I have done too much reading about it, so you can just pick my brain about it. Thanks.
This Enfield, I mean, what are the other businesses in that same company, Aisha Motors?
Aisha Motors has a commercial vehicle business which makes trucks and carriers basically.
What is the percentage of this bike business in that whole?
Revenue wise, it is almost half, I guess. And profit wise, this is more than 70%. The bike business.
Supposing you are running a fund, and let's say Harley Davidson is listed overseas.
It is.
And it is, oh that's great. And you have to choose between one of the two stocks. So which one would you choose and why?
At what price?
Today's current price.
Neither, I would say.
Okay.
So the reasons are strictly valuation based. I like the brands, but I wouldn't like to pay so much for a brand. So for example, Harley Davidson has barely grown in the past 5 years. You see.
Yeah. And same could happen to Enfield in the next 5 years.
I don't want to comment on that because the way the volume is picking up, so according to their plans, they are going to make 9 lakh motorcycles by 2018. And the strategy is not to have oversupply in the market, in capacity terms. He wants the demand to be more than the capacity to produce every single time. So you will definitely have a delay of 5 to 6 months in getting them, which works in favor of them because the brand pull is very strong. But if you don't have that kind of brand pull, it can actually backfire. So people will go and buy something else, and the customer is gone forever.
But current numbers are mainly in India, right? Or so they're selling outside also. But the percentage they're selling outside from India?
I think it's 5% of their sales are coming from outside.
So it's a major range in India, right?
Yeah.
That it can saturate sometime.
I don't know when.
But that's kind of
But yeah, I mean, you can just extrapolate the growth and you realize how soon you need to hit the ceiling. Look at this. So Harley Davidson volumes have been improving, but not at the rate at which they were. Sorry. Yeah. In this part of the same decade, last decade. So lots of reasons. The competition is increased in the native market. The brand pull is still there. They are making more profits from their merchandise and spare part sales like any other company, auto company does. But for that level of volume growth, I would want a cheaper valuation.
Can you go to the graph where you showed about the market expansion overseas and that inverted pyramid thing?
after this.
Yeah, that one. So what is the strategy that they are thinking that your third figure doesn't mean that they are actually going to go into that 750cc, or is it that they are going to try and expand that lower triangle?
They want to expand this part.
Sorry. Okay, that's the one that they want to expand.
That's what they think they are capable of doing with the technology and products that they have, and they don't want to go anywhere above or below all these categories.
Right, okay. And which obviously means that in that 750cc bike, Harley Davidson is still a established player, and Yamaha and all, they will continue to dominate that market because people will demand that.
Yeah.
But then there is a large section who will want to come into that. So,
The idea is to create this as a leisure as well as commute bike. Which I don't know if there is a market for that, but yeah, it might be interesting if people actually do that.
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting way of analysis. So,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
exactly what.
Sure.
Someone at Enfield used to work at Harley, told me that Harley tried to acquire Enfield,
Okay.
but Siddharth didn't want to sell. So interesting fact.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know.
This Royal Enfield brand is owned by Eicher or it is licensed to them?
Which one?
It's owned by.
They bought the entire brand and the factory, I think on Enfield India, and they merged the company to Eicher.
So this brand is originally British brand, correct? So now Britishers have no connection with this.
What is the life of, say, a Royal Enfield versus a Harley? And is the second-hand market very different in the US versus India?
It's an interesting question. What I read about Harley is that there is no second-hand market. There is, but only people who are in financial distress, who want to get rid of something and make money out of it. These bikes are heavily customized to your preference. So once you customize them, you don't want to let go. You might sell your home or refinance your home, but not your bike. In Enfield, I don't know what the second-hand market is. I have to ask.
The life of these versus, say, a Pulsar or a regular bike?
I
Is
think
it a longer lived bike?
these are rugged engines, so they last longer. Plus, they require more maintenance. So by default, you take care of them more. And because they are rugged, they have better suspension, so less of vibration. That also helps in the longevity of the bike. But I don't know the specific average age. There are people who own for 40 years and they ride these bikes. So, and the engine has to give out at some point. You may also replace the engine, but why would you do that? You can just buy a new bike.
Why didn't Hero, Honda or Bajaj sort of create this category themselves? Like they've been players for so long, so why didn't they experiment with this category and see whether there was pent-up demand for it?
Which category? Middle market.
Super premium category, where demand, like, small bag, 5 lakh, 10 lakh, things like that. Like, do you think they missed out on that strategy?
I think they are trying to go into the middle market first. So Bajaj partnered with KTM, Bajaj partnered with Kawasaki to create those 390, 225 plus cc till 1000 cc. That's the range that they want to play in. So in that range you don't get too many high-end bikes. But that is the middle market where even Royal Enfield is. So if you look at this graph, he's specifically comparing his Kawasaki sales, KTM sales. This is of the higher category, this is the smaller KTM bike. And he's comparing with the other middle market players in that category. He's not comparing with the super premium. Of course, Harley Davidson comes there because the Ninja is 4 lakh plus in terms of cost of the bike itself. But they are there. But I don't think the focus is there because if you look at the numbers, volumes of It's 3.2 number is coming from mass market bikes, and you don't want to alienate your mass market. Or the brand is known for mass market bikes, so might as well
create a different brand.
You can. So that's why they are partnering with those people who want to experiment. That is their strategy. Somebody might actually come up with a new bike itself.
But
Mahindra is doing
heavy engineering, right? That engineering is trying with the Kawasaki or the things too.
So Kawasaki's bike is made by Kawasaki only. It's just marketed.
But they don't have the engineering to make those CC bikes, right? 500 CC or 1000.
But that can be acquired. But again, why would you acquire it when you don't have the same pricing power? And so it can only happen if you have a story behind that brand. So Kawasaki has a story behind it. The KTM has a story behind it. It's a naked street bike. So people have association with it in a different way. There are KTM races, there are Ninja drag races, and all those things. We will not know because we don't drive those bikes. But people who are in that circle, they have bought those bikes just to be in those networks and those communities. So if you don't have that, and instead of spending money and diversifying yourself from scratch, might as well partner with somebody with a decent strategy. It doesn't affect your existing base and manufacturing capability of all.
Overall bike market in India has not been doing so well for the past few years.
Right.
So I guess if you look at it from a household perspective, it's probably one bike per household. So where do you see the market in India going from that perspective? I'm talking purely from a penetration point of view. Is Is there still a lot of headroom for growth?
I would still want to focus on categories. So, if you are asking me about lower CC bikes, which are the mass market bikes, because the base is so large, the growth numbers will definitely not look as attractive as the smaller segment bikes, which are at a lower base. So, I will personally not get seduced by these kind of numbers. Because I know that there is specific demand for it. It's the people who have money and who want to spend it are going to do it. And these are not commuters. These are basically enthusiasts, fanatics about these particular brands. Whereas I will not see a Hero Motorcorp fanatic or a Bajaj Pulsar fanatic. They might be. I'm not saying they should not be. But they will buy it more as a commuter as well as some styling. And if at all your old bike has conked off, you can probably replace it with a new one. Then that's where Royal Enfield also wants to be in the same field where if somebody wants to upgrade from the mass market bike, their prices are accessible. It's not completely beyond the range of that person. So I think if you take that mass market category, sheer volume is making the growth look weak, but in terms of numbers of bikes made, they are quite significant.
So I think that's kind of what Rudy says in that video on the website, in which they're trying to basically incentivize people to use the Enfield as a commuter, where should basically upgrade, right? So premiumize, right? The 7th day commission or whatever catalyst you want to call it. And if you're going in for a new bike or an upgrade, you think twice about potentially taking that delta, trying to get a premium bike, right? Which gives you that experience, which can be a useful commuting.
The more interesting part of what you're saying is the bikes have decent mileage. Right. They are not like really bad, like those bigger engine bikes who give.
So I guess another interesting point, right, is I was in Vapi maybe a month ago and I happened to go to a Royal Enfield store just for fun to look at bikes, and the experience was fantastic, right? So no different in a tier 3 city as compared to tier 1 city. But what was more interesting was I talked to them about vendor financing. Right, so they basically had HDFC Bank and the other banks. Interestingly enough, 70% of customers paid in cash on the spot. So think about that, right? So think about the demand from that perspective. Second thing is, average age were typically people who were just out of college and or essentially buying their first bike, subscribing to Royal Enfield. So it tells you a lot about who the target customer is, how they're financing it, right? So essentially, I think it's less of a case of opportunity for growth in terms of Enfield taking market share, but it's more so creating the bike themselves.
That's exactly what has happened for me. The market share of Royal Enfield has also gone up in the past 5-6 years. In fact, financing, as you mentioned, Harley Davidson business is so fantastic. So 10% of their revenues come from financing. And these are expensive bikes. The average price point is $20,000. And even in the US, where the median income is $50,000 a year, nobody has the kind of money to put in a bike just for leisure. So financing is a very important part for even a regular bike owner, unless you are well off. So the business that has grown has also grown because they provided the financing to the dealerships on their own. So on their balance sheet, of course, they are taking the risk of that. So they have made sure that the financing is not a huge part of their overall units sold. I don't know if Royal Enfield does that. I don't think they will finance it on their own. They'll probably go to the other financial institutions.
They're kind of the paywalls a lot, so people generally, if they are going to finance, will basically use some third party and then basically.
So get the financing and go to the store.
Yeah, they're not using, surprisingly, the partners within the store for whatever reason.
That's actually interesting. Why wouldn't you? It's like promoting yourself again, right?
Yeah.
If you get, say,
Although
pre-approved loan.
the cash component was very, very interesting.
Any idea what kind of deals happen? So when you buy real estate, the pre-approved bank loans are given.
Yeah.
You go through a particular.
I have no idea. So interestingly enough, they had in that month they sold 2 females bikes. Right? So you actually look at the target market. So essentially, I think they sold like 8 or 9 bikes to females. And of the bikes sold in that Vapi store, I think maybe like there were a dozen customers who owned 5 Enfields.
Wow, 5 Enfields?
Yeah. In a small tier 3 city like in the middle of nowhere.
It's like what
Interesting. So there's some really interesting statistics that come about when you actually dig a little deeper.
But I actually searched for it. So female bikers, most of them have Enfield type bikes. So
Right.
there's a user base of women riding bikes. So
Pretty heavy, by the way, it's very fine.
it is really heavy, yeah. Any more questions?
Which company is trading at higher valuation? Both are high valuation.
Any guess?
I guess maybe Royal Enfield.
Yeah, Asian model is probably close to 45 times, and Harley Davidson is around, I guess, 18 to 20 times. Incidentally, when that EV article came, that's when the stock started moving up. The Harley stock started moving up. It's up some 18 to 20% in the past 1 month itself. It's very interesting. But actually, that triggered the presentation, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. So I have to thank ET for this presentation also. In fact, if you get a chance, do read that lean machine, because it talks about how these people thought of changing the smallest components in the supply chain and measuring the outcomes on a quarter-on-quarter basis to see if something was working or not. It's a very scientific approach to addressing your manufacturing issues, and which I think even Siddharth Lal did. So what was interesting is I tried to find the volume numbers in the annual reports of Eicher Motors before 2004. When he started to, he actually came in at 2000 and ran this unit. So in the 3 years, there was no manufacturing of Royal Enfield bikes. It's surprising, right? I mean, if you're trying to reinvigorate a brand, you would want more bikes to be out there, no matter what, just to keep them running, keep the shop floor running. But he decided to not produce bikes. Instead, he fixed all the issues one by one. I don't know which methodology he used. Maybe it's a book coming down the line. But it's quite interesting that he followed some of the similar principles to fix supply chain, manufacturing, and then work on the brand from the ground up. And it also helps to have the recall of Royal Enfield. Good. Let's discuss more over drinks and dinner. Thanks a lot. Just an announcement. Next three sessions of FOF will not be happening in this facility because they are going to do some renovation. It will be happening at Garware Club. We will announce that exact venue in the emails when we send out, and Anya will also give you a call and inform you about it.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.